My dear people, how are you? This is Dr. Venkat. Well, let me ask you something. How many of you thought that engineering can be used as a tool for creating religious harmony in the society? Today, we are going to be meeting one of my very good colleagues and friends, Harry, who is working on that particular thing. Today, we are going to be interacting with him about how he has used civil engineering architecture as a tool for creating some of the interesting civil structures in some of the small islands, including places such as Tuvalu, Philippines, Indonesia, and some of the other remote South Pacific islands. I'm very happy to have him for our lecture series, and let us learn from him, shall we? Harry, you are very welcome to our lecture series.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I am Harry Thorpe. I'm one of the three directors of Corkin Studio. Corkin Studio is an international design and build practice that creates impact through architecture, taking projects from brief formulation with charities and NGOs or local communities, all the way through the design stages and then onto site and using all those different parts of the design process as a vehicle for education and for cultural and skills exchanges.
Hari, that is really interesting. Can you give an example of what you do?
Yeah, sure. So one example of a project we completed this summer 2025, was a multi-use hall in a place called Jerumbun, which is on the island of Borneo. So we worked with a charity called Friends of Nature, Forests and People, and they are basically a charity based in southern Kalimantan, so that's the Indonesian portion of Borneo, and they are looking to increase awareness both locally within the Indonesian population, but also internationally with all of the tourists that come over to see the orangutans in the national parks, and explain to them the devastation caused by illegal logging, by palm oil plantations, and trying to educate people around biodiversity and sustainable farming. So they have a very small facility there where they get groups of international and domestic tourists and they take them on week or 2 week long workshops. But they were struggling to be able to deliver these workshops without a usable, covered, sheltered space for all of the indoors kind of lesson plans that they had to deliver. So what we did was we worked with the charity throughout the whole process. The charity were or are heavily embedded with the local community, with all of their team being made up of local men and women from Jerumbun and Pangkalambun, which is the local kind of town. And we went through the process discussing with them the materials they have available, the kind of logistics of getting that to site. So it had to come on a tractor to a boat and then a 3 hour boat along the river to another tractor that would bring it up the hill. So trying to work out all the logistical issues, and then also what their ambitions were for the space and for the site as a whole. What we did is we then collated all of that information along with any site information that they had, which is somewhat limited, and a few aerial kind of drone shots, and a few photographs of the kind of ground conditions. And we put all of that together and came up with a design that we basically iterated with them through kind of concept, developed, technical design stages, and always bearing in mind their budget throughout the process. Then that was all done kind of over a 4 to 5 month period. Then from July through till September, we took a team of around 20 to 25 international participants, people from all over the world visiting, flying into Borneo to live there for 8 weeks and construct the design alongside our team of Corkin leaders and also a team of local community members. And throughout that process, the construction process, there was lots of changes to the design. There was lots of opportunity for both the local skilled laborers and the international design participants, whether they're engineers or architecture students or landscape design, whatever it might be, to come up with their ideas and essentially exchange the knowledge that they have either through their crafts, be it a local carpenter, or through their education at maybe university or even professionally.
Harry, that was really interesting example that you have given us because you have involved the community right from the beginning of the design process and until even during the construction of it, etc. The community involvement was an integral part of the entire process overall. Can you give us an example of another project in which you identified a social problem, and how did you identify that social problem?
Sure. So I would start by saying all of our projects identify a social problem. They identify social, environmental, and economic issues. Our designs and our projects are then based on those issues, and the briefs are formed around them, alongside or guided by the local community. One example I can think of was in 2023. We took on a project in Java, in Indonesia, within a community that was a mixed religious community of both Muslim and Christian faiths. The charity or group that we were working with was essentially a group set up at a university that was then embedded and integrated into the local community, and their ambition and their goals were to create harmony and create understanding between all of the different types of people in that community. There had been a history in this particular area of radicalism, with one member of the community actually being arrested and put in prison for some number of years for radical intentions. The point of this project was actually at the stage in which this individual was about to be released. When we hear about these kind of stories online, you think about someone who is alone or maybe not engaged in the community, but actually this man was a father, a brother, a friend to a lot of these people, and was coming back to a community that he knew very well. And, you know, this was a very different setting. However, the charity were aware that there would always be a kind of misunderstanding or a misconception, and there was always going to be tension between these two different sets of people. So they brought this to us, and we talked about a space that would be open and disarming and welcome to everyone. And we then went on to design and build essentially a multi-faith prayer space that was small and was pretty conservative, and was generally made up of as many different trades and as many different materials, and because it was going to involve as many different people of the community as possible. The more materials we could involve, the more different material suppliers we would have to discuss with, the more different tradespeople from the local community we would have to engage. And that way, everyone would have touched the project, or a lot of different people within the community would have touched the project in one way or another. Obviously, from an engineering and design standpoint, that means detailing between timber and masonry construction and steel construction. And the site itself was a little bit tricky with a sloping site and heavy rainfall. We also wanted the space to be very open, so we had to think about prefabricating pivoting doors and sliding doors and windows to be able to open the space up to everyone. And all of this kind of came together to create a space that is now used by all different members of the community.
Harry, can I move to the next part of the question, in which what are the engineering solutions that you thought of for this social problem?
I think for this project specifically in Java, a lot of the solutions that were required were based around a lack of information before going to the site. So we had to think about almost worst case scenarios when it came to foundations. We had to account for the worst case scenario in terms of the strength of the cement that they would have there. We had to account for low skill level. So we designed our timber work in a way that it could be done by basic novices on site, that it would be portal frame design. So it's a repeated process that allows people to gain skills over time, but quite quickly from doing repetitive processes. It was also chosen as a portal frame design because there was much less risk in terms of working at height. So we chose a construction technique that could be done flat on the floor by groups of people working on the same thing at once, because what we wanted to do is have as many people involved in the build as possible and kind of sharing that experience. The more conversations people can have around the build, the more that feeds back into the societal factors, the more it kind of brings a positive and a kind of joint ownership of the space. And we found throughout all of our projects that the more areas for integration and for collaboration, the more that the project is then taken ownership of in the years to come after we obviously hand it over to the community. So those are the main factors in terms of the structure itself. Was considering worst case scenarios, finding the most democratic way to build it, which for us was a portal frame timber, and also accounting for climatic factors. So this was the slope of the land, so mudslides with heavy rainfall, and also using engineering detailing and engineering specification for earthquake design.
Now, my question, something that some of the other students listening might have as well, okay, is the social problem was religious harmony or the lack of it. And the engineering solution that you provided was creating a multi-faith hall. Where is the bridge between the social problem and your engineering solution? Can you please tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. I think the simplest way to explain it is the social problem, which I would very quickly caveat by saying that was guided and was in part identified by a charity that was embedded and integrated into the community. We never come to these locations and impose what we think the problem is. We work with people who have been embedded there for sometimes decades and have a far greater understanding of the nuanced issues that we're talking about. But the issue itself, as we understood it and as we kind of unpackaged it, was that we had different demographics of people closed off from each other physically, and in terms of communication and in terms of mindsets. So what we wanted to do was to create both a physical space, but also a space to build and a space for construction that was open. So it's as simple as that, from closed off, siloed groups to an open area for everyone to collaborate and work together. So that happened in the construction, it happened in the design, then it happened in the construction phase, and then the actual physical building is also physically open. You can see through it, you can see who's in there, you can come together, you can be inside or outside, but still feel part of that wider space. So that was how we kind of brought it all together.
Harry, this is wonderful. Thanks a lot for creating this bridge. Now, Harry, even though the next question in a way is already obvious, I'm going to ask you, how did your solution, engineering solution, result in elements, important elements such as peace building, social harmony, social justice, sustainability, etc.?
I mean, by essence of how the building is used, it will create that. But by creating a space that is open for anyone to use, that's in the programming of the building. So the people who essentially are responsible for the building, the charity, they've programmed it and its use in a way that it's open to all. In terms of getting different people involved in the building and kind of trying to create equity across what we do, A lot of that is done in the language that we use when we talk about the building to the local teams. It's done in the documentation. So a lot of our work will be based in very developed and kind of highly complex ideas in both engineering and in architecture. However, the way that we'll then present those ideas to local community members where language might be an issue or education might be an issue, we have to make this an open experience for everyone to then feel confident and welcomed to be part of the solution. And that has to be from people of a university background locally, people who've never been in any kind of formal education, all the way through to, as I say, the charity themselves were a university-based group. So there had to be equity across all nationalities, across all faiths, across all educational levels. So to do that, we use a lot of visual stimulation. So we use a lot of models, a lot of three-dimensional views, rather than very kind of complex sectional details or very difficult to understand specification packages or anything like that that you would potentially see in a more traditional building site here in the UK. We find that this brings a level of understanding, which then brings a level of confidence, which then brings people on the same platform to be able to interact with each other very openly and very kind of willingly.
How has this created religious harmony and also the problem that was identified initially, yeah, by the charity and the requirement that they had? How did this engineering solution solve that problem? Can you please be like in a few sentences, probably?
Yeah, so the space is open to all to use. So they now have weekly prayer for both Muslim and for Christian faiths. The space is also used by groups to bring kids for daycare. It's used for women's educational sessions. It's used by young entrepreneurs to have workshops and discussions. So it's used by all areas of the community openly and freely.
Harry, as engineers, we always mention about the limitations of our work. So what would you say are some of the limitations of this engineering solution for the social problem?
I think that the limitation that comes to mind first would be the actual physical size of the space. I know that the charity has ambitions to build bigger spaces on the site as well, and that this was essentially a first run at this kind of process, because the process was new to them as well, involving us and involving different members of the community. So I think at the moment, as it stands, the structure that we've built, the main limitation would be the size of that space, the facilities that it has in terms of toilets and washrooms and things like that.
Thanks. Harry, one final question is this. For the students who are listening to the video, what advice would you give them in terms of how they can identify some of the social issues? And for those issues that they are identifying, how can they use engineering as a tool to solve it?
Yeah, I think in terms of identifying social issues, a lot of that can be found really in all manner of modern day rhetoric. You look across all areas of reporting in the news, in all media outlets, social media as well. We as a generation are definitely the most tuned into social inequality, social issues around the world. I think finding them closer to home is about connecting with like-minded people and connecting with people already working in those spaces. So charities, NGOs, it could be individuals, it could be local communities, but really it's about listening to other people and listening to the struggles or the problems that they're facing. I would say the next part of that question is the most difficult part. Often as people working within problem-based professions, so engineering and architecture, we're looking at ways to solve every possible problem from our perspective, from an engineering perspective. lots of problems can be solved from those perspectives. However, it's always a completely multi-skill, multi background kind of approach that needs to be taken. A lot of social issues are incredibly complex. So what we need to do is offer up our ideas and offer up our knowledge, and see how that then interacts or interfaces with someone who is maybe on a psychological side, or maybe a social side, or even geographical, all these different types of people, historical people, political people, and see how the engineering solution can actually integrate with all of these other sides. And really the main point to that is being flexible, being collaborative. Your skill is being able to solve problems. So being able to solve multiple problems in different ways, or one problem in multiple different ways, is really where you're going to be able to start to have a massive impact on these kinds of projects.
Thanks a lot, Harry. With this wonderful message, we will finish the video.